I'd learned that a lot of the best marketed brands weren't the most effective, but actually a lot of the most effective weren't the best marketed. So I thought, why can't you kind of do both?
And that £600 million brand was actually founded in a spare bedroom back in 2010.
So I had a distribution business, which I sort of fell out of love with, to be honest. Had the idea for Grenade. I've always been really interested in the military and fitness. Grenade kind of became almost like an obvious fit. You either fail or you learn. When you've got a brand, you have to do every single job. We flew a hot air balloon past Glastonbury. We drive the tank through London, we park outside Westminster. I just always did what I enjoyed. I'd make it count for something. We did a £200 million deal with Mondelez. I think changes that are coming now with the brand that we have to be more careful of. At the time, we were so fearless and naive and stupid. You do all this crazy stuff, don't you? Where does this end?
Ow! Welcome to Road to Success.
Big Al.
Big Al. Welcome to Road to Success. This podcast was always supposed to be about entrepreneurs that I would view to be just like yourself. People that started from a spare bedroom or with nothing and have just turned it into the most incredible brand, story, life goals, and even assets off the back of it. But many people will obviously know what you do, and it says on your top it has been a huge part of your life. But Al, in your own words, who are you and what do you do?
Okay, so my name's Big Al. I'd like to say I'm becoming a lifelong entrepreneur now, but I've worked in the health and fitness industry for, 33 years, I think it is this year. I first walked into a gym when I was 15 years old, and I was hooked. I was hooked with health and fitness. And then I've been involved in health and fitness in some way, shape or form ever since. I've worked in gyms, I've been a personal trainer, I've had an import distribution business, and then finally now, so I've got a £600 million brand. So, and it still feels new, it still feels exciting.
And that £600 million brand was actually founded, from what I've learned, in a spare bedroom in your previous house back in 2010?
That's right, yeah, 2010. So I had a distribution business, which I sort of fell out of love with, to be honest. Had the idea for Grenade, which is twofold. I've always been really interested in the military, as you've seen looking around my house and some of the stuff that I like to do. And then military and fitness. Grenade kind of became almost like an obvious fit. I've always been very interested in the science behind products and making product that people get benefit from. And because I've been a distributor and I'd sold lots of different brands, mostly American-made brands, over like a 10-year period of having this distribution business, I'd learned a lot about probably what people don't want as well, and what people think they might want, and again, probably don't. And I'd learned that lots of people you come across are going to want to lose weight. So I decided to focus on weight loss. And also through distributing a lot of the brands that I'd bought in from the US, I'd learned that a lot of the best marketed brands weren't the most effective, but actually a lot of the most effective weren't the best marketed. So I thought, why can't you kind of do both? And back then, the supplement industry back then, it was like the Wild West. And there was a lot of focus on just hype, label claim, jazzy marketing, and just obtaining a consumer, let's say, with wild claims and at any cost. And then the product not probably doing what working as advertised, and then that consumer sort of dropping away and never coming back again. But they take the money that they'd made and they just go and find another one. And as a distributor selling product, I relied on repeat customers, so going to the same gym. So I used to cherry pick all the brands and only sell stuff that I knew worked and was effective, and I tried myself because I've always been into my training. But I'd learned that it had to be easier to keep existing consumers happy than just keep on looking for new ones. So, which, like I said, seemed to be the model of a lot of brands at the time. So I really decided to double down on an effective weight loss product, develop the product in sort of, just pre-2010. Didn't really know what to call it. And again, I was a fitness instructor, got no qualifications in terms of having and running a business or a brand. So just learn everything from the get-go. And, it's like when you've got a brand, you have to do every single job. And, you either fail or you learn. There's no other way of doing it really. So failed a lot, and yes, set it up from a spare bedroom, £500 startup loan, which was a UK trade investment loan called Passport to Export, which is weird because you had to kind of spend the money to claim back the loan. So it was it wasn't like they gave you the money and they didn't want it back. And then literally just worked and worked and worked and learned and worked and learned some more, and trial and error, you kind of get there.
But you mentioned that what we're going to go into now to try and understand how somebody ends up running a £600 million business is, what did your childhood look like? Paint us a photo of how as a kid. Like, okay. I'm guessing you were quite outdoorsy, quite on it.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I was always very good at kind of entertaining myself. Yes, I'd go and play with my friends and stuff in the street, but I was equally happy just focusing on something and just kind of having that me time. I've become kind of louder and more outgoing as I've got older. I wouldn't say I was shy as a kid, but on my dad's side, they were all painfully shy. My dad's still kind of quite shy to this day. And just to back it up a little bit further, the family business that my dad had, they were heavy goods vehicle mechanics. They'd done it since the war, and all they'd done is kind of work hard and for very limited gain. And they'd made a living out of it, but they didn't have much to show for how hard they worked. So I got the work ethic from them, and they all worked until they died. My granddad died at work when he was 82. He went blind and just went to work because he didn't know what else to do. And he was kind of passing them tools, but he was blind, so he couldn't see what he was handing them. And it was kind of like it sort of sounds funny now, and it was probably quite funny at the time, but you look, it's really sad. And then my dad's brother, he was 15 years older. He was like unbelievable. I mean, shy. There is. I'm not sure there's a word for
how
shy.
Introverted.
Shy doesn't do it justice. So he never left home. Never had a girlfriend. Died at 74 at home living with his mom. She was 98, my nan. He never went to a shop his entire life, and all he did was he just worked 7 days a week in this family business, the mechanics business, and then just had a stroke and came to work because he didn't know what to do. He just sort of died at 74. And then my dad was going to go the same way. So my dad was 60 at the time, but dad was able to retire. And luckily, dad's had sort of 20 years of retirement. But my point being, what did I learn from that? I learned I didn't want to be a heavy goods vehicle mechanic. I've got no interest in how things work. I drive, I fly, I operate machinery all the time. And you have to understand to a point how it works in terms of being an aviator. But I never wanted to be a mechanic or an engineer. I'm just not mechanically minded. And also because they'd never really made any money out of it, I couldn't really see what it achieved. So what I learned from there was if I was going to work and adopt the Barrett family work ethic, I'd make it count for something. And I think it took me a long time to realise what that would be. So I just always did what I enjoyed. I went to the gym. I started at a gym on work experience when I was 15. And then our holidays, whenever we went abroad till I was 17, our holidays were always on the south coast at a caravanning pool. And next to the caravan parking pool is the Royal Marine Commando training base. And I used to stand, and again, interested in training, interested in fitness, interested in military, because my dad's family were. Now, they all fought in the Second World War. So I grew up with some of this stuff, and I'd stand and watch them train. And I think it's amazing, all these experiences from your childhood that you probably don't realise at the time are all shaping your DNA. They're all forming the character. And I think it doesn't just sort of like shape or mould you. It probably like carves you, doesn't it, into what's coming. So I was never interested in football or cricket or rugby or sort of more traditional sports. But I just kind of fell in love with weight training. And that was mostly because in the 90s, the American wrestling was big. I was 14, 15 years old and I was skinny. And then all the big action stars back then, I mean, you won't remember because you're not old enough, but, it was Van Damme, Stallone, Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Not The Rock.
But again, that's a good example. That's a contemporary example. I was kind of too old for The Rock. But yeah, I'm wondering how many people The Rock has inspired to go to the gym. It will be millions and millions and millions. So yeah, the American wrestling was kind of, was interesting to me. And again, like sort of the theatre and stuff of it. So it got me into the gym. And I was like 10 and a half stone wringing wet. And I was quite academic at school, but I was quite bright at school. But I found school so unbelievably boring. And I was never disruptive as in like throwing chairs disruptive, but I just found it all so easy and pointless. And because I've got a good memory, and school, I presume it hasn't changed, is certainly now, it's kind of a memory test. It was bizarre. You'd sort of sit there like, 8 years old, and I was good at spelling, so I could spell words way above and beyond what kids would be able to spell, like, rhinoceros and rhododendron, quite words I probably couldn't spell now, to be fair. But, sort of 6, 7 years old. So, but if I saw that word once, I could remember it. And I could sort of understand how words were formed. And, it kind of made me quite clever. But the teacher would tell you something, they'd say, what's the capital of Peru or whatever, it's Lima. And then they'd say, what's the capital of Peru? And you'd go, Lima. And they go, well done. You just told me that. I didn't really get it. I just thought, is this it? So I found it really boring. I couldn't wait to get out. And I sort of dropped out of school when I was 15. And I jumped on the number 11 bus and I went to the gym because that's what I was interested in. And I'd done work experience there when I was 14. And I went to the owner of the gym and I said, I need a job. I've just sort of walked out of school. And he's like, your parents are going to kill us. And I said, I'm just not going back. I just hate it. I'm not learning anything. And I think that's probably the point, of life. You're learning all the time, aren't you? And I just don't feel I learned anything at school. But ever since I left school, I haven't stopped learning. But I've learnt what I wanted to learn as opposed to what they wanted to teach you.
It sounds like when you were younger, you'd make a decision quite quickly. My mates take the mick out of me for using the words, right? And then like something then also then happens. And it sounds like you're quite, as you said, impulsive when you were younger to make those decisions. Well, does that mean that you were quite self-conscious and you would do everything for yourself?
Yeah, potentially. I wouldn't have said I was, I certainly don't think I've ever been selfish. I'm probably trying to be more selfish. I'm certainly more impatient and impulsive than I've ever been. I'm going to give you an example. I've got a plane and, go flying, and was going to go flying down to Cornwall, probably would be a couple of years ago. And the plane is like an hour away. It's at Gloucester Airport, and the drive to Gloucester is an absolute ball ache if it's not going well. And I was having a bad commute to Gloucester to get into my plane. This is going to sound ridiculously indulgent. You know what's coming. And
what did you buy, Al?
I thought, I don't know, Ben. I can't remember. I remember thinking, fuck it, I'm buying a helicopter. So I did. But it was weird that in my brain, buying and importing and learning to fly a helicopter was somehow easier and quicker than just sitting in traffic like everyone else. It must be an entrepreneurial thing, but I just like the challenge. I've always embraced the challenge. And like I said, I guess as a kid, I always did what I wanted to do, as opposed to my mates did what our other mates did. They all kind of did the same thing. And I've always been one of those people, if everyone's going one way, I just always think, I wonder what's the other way. I just can't help it. I think it's kind of some form of Asperger's or autism or whatever, where I don't like being told what to do. And as soon as someone says, don't do that, or you shouldn't do that, something inside me just triggers. And I just have to go and do it. And if I think of something I have to do it, it's really dangerous.
I actually fully understand how your mind works.
Well, for years I thought it was weird. Well, I am weird, but
other than the academia at school. See, I'm fucking how ironic is that?
Yeah. I didn't want to correct you there, but you corrected yourself, so that's absolutely fine.
I did correct myself. Other than that, there's a lot of similarities there that not only I could see just little traits in myself, but many other entrepreneurs that have had actually product-based businesses. I think product-based business entrepreneurs are actually quite like that. I think they find the science of things quite fascinating, and they always can't help but going after something or trying to improve something or make something better. But then that kid that's walked into a gym, he's just made that decision, impulsive. I'm going in here. I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm going in here and I'm doing something. Where does that take you? Because you did mention you had a business, and this is the bit that I'd just like to try and get clear. You had a business prior to Grenade.
That's right, yeah.
You had a business prior to Grenade, but you still took out a £500 loan to start Grenade in the spare bedroom.
Yeah, that's it. And certainly also just to back you up a bit more, I think I've always, like we said as well, how these experiences shape you. And I know we grew up poor, so and I was a free school meal child, so I was the only kid in my year that had free school meals. So as such, I didn't want to be the only person there with a green ticket. So I used to go home for lunch, even though I lived like a mile and a quarter away. And I'd literally walk to school in the morning, walk home at lunchtime, have 10 minutes in the house, then walk back to school, then walk home again. So I walked kind of 5 miles a day. But then to me, it was fitness, and I didn't want to sit at school with everyone else. I just wanted to go and do what I wanted to do. And I was, there was probably a real stigma then of like being being on free school meals. But also then, if you grow up poor, that's an amazing fire under you to think, do you know what? My family work hard. And actually, and I saw all the arguments it caused. My mum and dad were always arguing about money. So I thought, I don't want to be arguing about money or whatever. So if that doesn't inspire you to go and make a difference or change something about your life, I don't know what would. So if ever I've not liked something about my life, I've just gone and changed it. And it's amazing how many people don't. I was saying before, I was 10.5 stone. I was really skinny and kind of clever. So I never got bullied, but I was kind of the skinny, nerdy kid, and I wanted to be bigger and more muscular, so I went and did something about it. I went to the gym and trained. So I think so many people now don't kind of take responsibility for their own lives and their own actions, and they wait for someone to come along and tell you what to do or change it for you. But we should be doing this ourselves, because no one's going to do it for you.
So what do you think's a catalyst moment that developed that open mindset when you were younger, rather than ended up being the introverted, shy, closed mindset that other family members had ended up with?
I think seeing the fact it probably didn't get them anywhere, that being shy didn't get them anywhere. And so, if there was, I started to learn how to put myself forward out of my comfort zone. So, if there was a play or something at school, I'd always be like the lead in the play. I'd be very nervous about it, and I wouldn't really want to necessarily do it. But I thought, I can't be shy.
Do you think I have to do this?
Yeah, probably. Yeah, I think so. And I think looking at, my uncle who never went into a shop, I know it's the other extreme, but just think it didn't really, get him anywhere. I was thinking about me, I want more out of my life than that. He had an existence. He didn't have a life. And certainly my dad, it's weird, isn't it? I've never wanted kids, and I'm not going to have kids. But from my dad's perspective, certainly the best thing he ever did was kind of have me, because all the stuff that he would have loved to have done himself and wanted to do, he's only ever done through me. I took him abroad. I've taken him flying. I've taken him to meet into certain very elite military bases, and I've done all the stuff with him that most people would probably do with their kids, but I've actually done it with my dad. I took him flying on Boxing Day, and he sort of sits there quite quietly because he can't take it all in. I mean, Dad had this business, this heavy goods vehicle mechanics business, and I think their turnover when they shut the business 20 years ago was about 80 grand a year turnover. I mean, we've done that in the first hour of a Monday morning, so he can't comprehend
what's going on.
What's kind of going on, really. I've actually stopped telling him, because he doesn't really, I don't think he knows what to say. I know he's really proud, and I love telling him stuff, but I remember showing him one of my first warehouses, and he's like, whose is all this stuff? I was like, well, it's mine, it's ours. And he'd be like, how are you going to sell all this? I said, I'll sell it. Well, what if you don't? But Dad was always quite negative, because I think his family were negative. And you'd always be looking at what if that happens? And, just go and get a job driving a van, go and get a proper job. And they'd always kind of play it safe. And I think, bear in mind, I'm not, I wouldn't say I was necessarily a risk taker per se. I'd always managed the downside. When I look back, you think, actually, I've taken quite a few risks here, but I've always backed myself.
I'm fascinated. Is that, because I can draw some similarities here? Is that relationship with your dad? Because I understand when with my mum now I don't have my dad. My mum was always quite the negative pessimist family. Lovely, and again, proud, as you say.
Yeah.
But I understand why you said you stopped telling them stuff, because what you think is going to get a really excited, rewarding sort of reaction actually doesn't, and it freaks that person out. They've got a different personality profile. But has that got better as the years have gone on?
No, it's got worse. I mean, I remember we did that deal, we did a £200 million deal with Mondelez 3 years ago, just coming up to 3 years ago. And I hadn't said anything to my parents about it, because it was confidential anyway, and they know I'm always busy, so it was just kind of for them I was just busier than usual. And the day we finally announced the deal, Sky News broke the story at 8:30 in the morning, and Dad watches Sky News, so I thought he might have seen this. And I remember ringing Mom and said, "Oh, I've just sold the business to." I actually didn't say Mondelez because she wouldn't know who Mondelez were. So I said, "I've sold the business to Cadbury," because they bought Cadbury and she knew who Cadbury's were. So I said, "I've sold the business to Cadbury for 200 million, Mum." And she went, "Oh, that's nice. Anyway, I better go. I've got the cat on my lap." I was like, "Bye then." So I don't know what I was expecting. It probably wasn't that. So I don't know. The more I've kind of said, they do just sort of shut things down a bit. But they're 80 and they are the way they are, and we love them to bits. But there's obviously just now worlds apart between what they kind of grew up with and what they're used to, and I guess the things now that I'm probably used to. I mean, again, backing up to my nan. My nan was born in. She was born in 1905. She died in 2003. So we think, the stuff that she saw between those years, probably the biggest changes mankind will and have ever seen. Man landing on the moon. She remembered the Titanic sinking, 2 world wars. I mean, a German bomb came through her roof in the Second World War and didn't explode. So, can you imagine? I mean, if that bomb had gone off, I'm not here. Grenade doesn't exist. It's bizarre, isn't it? The things, the strange quirks of fate. And, we said about the experiences that shape us. A bomb came through my nan's roof in the early 1940s. And in the late 90s, I went to pick her up for Christmas Day, because she's come around to ours for Christmas Day. And I had an Audi S8. And I went to pick her up and got her in the car. And again, she's in her mid-90s. And she said, "Oh, this is a nice car." I didn't think, did I? I just said, "Oh, yeah, it's German." And as soon as the words left my lips, I thought, can I swear?
Yeah.
I thought, fuck it. So I thought, oh, God. And anyway, she's like, "Stop the car! Stop the car!" And I tried to kind of smooth over it. But she's like, "Stop the car." Anyway, I pulled over on the side of the road. She's trying to get out. I'm like, "Nan, get back in. Get back in. Not going to ruin this, German. Not going to ruin that. I'm not going to ruin this car." It was like, "Nan, just get back in. It's Christmas Day. Come on, we're going round for some food and whatever." "No, not going anywhere. No, I'm not. Won't go in this car. They killed my budgie." Like, well, Audi didn't kill your budgie, Nan. But it was like, and I said, "Look, it was, 60 years ago, maybe let it go."
It's a tough subject to talk about with that.
It would have died by now anyway, now. So anyway, she was, but again, this is the Barrett stubbornness, isn't it? So she wouldn't go an inch further. So I have to ring Dad to come and decant her out of my car into his car. He's got a Nissan Primera. I daren't tell her it's Japanese. Can you imagine? So, but imagine that something that had such an impact on you that, 50, 60 years later, when you watch these those war veterans and they start talking about it, I mean, they're all well up, don't they? You think? So I don't know, maybe nowadays we all got it too easy. Perhaps we wanted a bit more hardship.
The experiences when you're younger actually carve you properly rather than anything else. And if you've had a war and bombs coming through your roof and your budgie killed, then I can understand that she probably remembers that because of how bad that really was.
Yeah, of course.
That catalyst moment.
Terrifying.
But so the bit I try and understand about all different entrepreneurs is what makes them drive, what makes them move, and what's those little trigger points. And we're starting to understand a lot of those trigger points to how you triggered starting a business. And it seems that you do everything for yourself. Where maybe if I just compare, when I was younger, I think I was always looking for a little bit like, "Oh yeah, Ben, you're doing a great job," and almost working towards every
said no one ever
every bit of gratitude. Yeah, that's why I've ended up here, and there's nobody left.
Sitting on my drive, driving around in your van, with no
bouncing around,
killing hitchhikers on your travels
up Fish Hill.
Fish Hill.
But do you just have a self thing where you're just like, "Yeah, well done, I'm happy with myself this week"? You smashed that.
Do you know
especially when that deal went through?
Do you know, I think that we could do an entire podcast on this. So firstly, I don't think I'm successful. A couple of reasons. You always compare yourself to people who've got more or done more than you, and we all do it. And I think that's the worst thing about social media, because you don't follow people less successful than you, do you? Really, you follow aspirational people, which doesn't necessarily work. And I've been really fortunate to spend huge amounts of time with people that I think are infinitely more successful than me. And I'm a mentor for Virgin Startups, so I've spent a fair bit of time with Richard. And if you stand on Necker Island in Richard's room and you look in, what do you see? You see the other islands. But then, Richard's telling me who owns the other islands. And, I think Richard is infinitely successful. And, and I said to him, like, what's it feel like to get there? You're there. And he went, I don't know where there is. It's exactly what he said. But then his closest neighbour owns an island called Eustatia. It's Larry Page, he owns Google. So, and then they're all trying to get into space and whatever. And you think, where does this end? So I think the trick is to be happy and content with as little as possible, i.e. nothing, and be happy and healthy. And then anything on top of that is just a bonus. And I realised years ago when I had nothing and I lived at home and I was working for minimum wage in a gym, I was super happy. When I got my first car was the best thing I ever obtained to give me that sort of freedom. And yes, I've got nicer cars now, but the difference between going from one nice car to another nice car is not as monumental or life-changing as going from walking to jumping in your first car, because that is your first transport. So nothing beats your first car. I had like a G-Reg Fiat Panda. I spent more time pushing it than driving it. But it's as you sort of start to become content and sort of happy with some of this stuff, like you just realise that anything's a bonus. And being healthy is worth a lot. So as we learned during COVID, health is wealth, and I always knew this. I've never drunk, I've never smoked, and I started training to kind of initially to look good. And then because, for the reasons I said, but then after that, I thought, I want kind of health and longevity here. Because again, looking at my family, I was seeing, my nan really barely left her house for the last 20 years of her life. She just had an existence in her house because she had quite poor mobility. And you think, well, if I get to 98, wow, but you want quality of life at 98. You don't just want to be sort of sat there. And I still am having knee problems and hip problems. And I think that the looking good and training for me started to turn into more about actually just... There's longevity in this. I want to kind of look after myself. If you've only got kind of that, that one body, when you've worn it out, you've worn it out. So I think that's probably the key potentially to success. And with success as well, my other point was going to be that you don't own success. It kind of, it's borrowed, it's not owned. And success can leave you at any point it chooses. And inevitably it does with people. I always look at kind of, former Olympic athletes, and people have been at the very, very top of their game for probably all their career until someone else comes along. And then it's great kind of working your way up to the top and being at the top. And again,
16-year-old darts player.
Well, yeah, exactly. And I think, amazing. But yeah, you've got to, I don't know, is that sort of peaking too early? Managing expectation of your own expectations as well is tough. So when I first started training, I had all these goals for weights that I would lift and things I would achieve. And as I did them all and went beyond them, yes, you reset certain goals. But I think sometimes, I'm always trying to teach myself contentment and enjoyment in the little things, a walk on a winter's day and, a beautiful sunny day. And there's lots and lots of things you can look around. It sounds a bit naff, doesn't it? But loads of things you can look around that are just absolutely free and we all have access to. Quite nice, the birds singing in the springtime, sort of nice. And yeah, very different to jumping into a £300,000 supercar. And all this stuff's great, but I think if you end up being, and I know people like this, if you end up being one of the people who can only do the big ticket stuff, I just don't know where that ends. I kind of feel sorry for some people like that. They must be so bored.
Just chasing the next car,
just chasing the next thing. I know people have got so many cars, they've never even seen, and they collect every car that comes out, like in terms of Lamborghinis, and it's just they're just obtaining stuff, but they're not really having the benefit of driving them. And I love driving. I don't care if I'm driving, if I'm an old Defender or I'm in a new supercar.
That's why the first traffic jam you bought a fucking helicopter.
That is true. Because that's not driving, you see, is it? That's just sitting. That's different. But also did sound impatient. So that has actually got a lot worse. Someone said to me once years ago, patience comes with age. Does it fuck? As you actually get older, you've got less time. So when you're a kid, you've got all the time in the world to do this stuff. So you should be more patient as a child, shouldn't you, really? And then you should sort of get less patient as you get older because you've got less time left. So I saw something the other day and I think people are going to spend 15 years scrolling through their phones. And it's like over the life. That's terrifying, that is, isn't it? 15 years doing all that shit. Can't imagine anything worse. Unless you're learning.
We've reached that part of the episode where I try and sell you something, but hold on, I promise it's worth your while. Back in the summer, I invested in a street food business called Gert Wings. Quite simply, the best chicken and sauce I've ever tasted. We've now decided to put all those sauces in amazing looking bottles and even our chicken salt. Go and check out our brand new online store and try some of our sauces at gertsauces.com or click the link in the description of this video. If you use the code BEN10, you'll also get a discount, so hopefully you can look forward to getting saucy. So tell me the story of how that person ends up founding one of the most recognised fitness brands in the UK.
Okay, so probably it was a hobby that turned into an obsession, I would say. And I think, do these make the best businesses? I think sometimes, you see a business or a brand and it's been sort of created by a team of kind of fairly corporate people from like a spin-off from a big brand, and they've all sat round and it's kind of, they've gone for the lowest common denominator for everything. I've ticked every box that they can and it's kind of got no soul, and they launch it and they spend hundreds of millions on it and then they kind of die because it's kind of, there's nothing authentic behind it. You see loads of those. That wasn't Grenade. No. So Grenade was very much, me training, like in the military, having been a PT for 8 years, everyone asking about weight loss, and I couldn't find a decent weight loss product. So I made one. And this is probably the point earlier about, how do you end up with sort of these jobs? I think entrepreneurs make their own jobs because no one will employ them. And actually, I know I was employed in gyms and stuff, but I found it quite frustrating because I wanted to probably run it better than they did. To a certain extent. So you end up sort of crafting something then that's, as a brand, brands are always extensions of their founders. So then you end up putting all these eccentricities and your neuroses and the OCD into something you're kind of passionate about. And created this weight loss product. And all my friends were in the military. I've been working in the military for years. I was getting asked a lot of advice by senior people in the military about performance and training and nutrition and supplements. So I was helping, advising, and I was interested in doing that. And then before you know it, it all kind of finds itself into a weight loss product called Grenade. And you touched on it before, it's, me and my wife at the time, we're operating out of our spare bedroom. There's no staff, just the two of us. We've got no budget. There's no marketing budget. But we just set out to create something special and create a product really that people would get benefit from. And a brand that, I thought was kind of, something that could potentially become iconic. And we worked at it for 4 years, never had a day off, never took a salary. We just worked and worked and worked. And I think probably a quite an instrumental point was about 2 years in, we had someone ring us up actually from a competitor brand at the time. And we were just kind of knuckling under and doing our thing and weren't really paying any attention to what anyone else is doing. Because I do believe if you kind of, if you look at the market, you'll start to look like the market. So we just had our heads down, did what we thought was right. And we got a phone call one day and he said, do you know that thermodetonator, our fat loss product, our only product, he said, do you know that thermodetonator is the number one selling weight loss product in the UK? I said, no. And I hadn't really thought about it because we weren't trying to do that. We just focused on sort of one customer and turning one customer into two and then two into four. And we just wanted people to keep coming back. And 80% of people did come back. And then all the marketing around it was stuff that we enjoyed doing, really. It was kind of going out into the desert in Vegas with our athletes at the time. We were all mad on the training and filming it. And we created a brand, I think that at the time, it was very bodybuilding focused and everyone was kind of interested in being big. And I'd gone past the stage of being big at that point because I was more interested in kind of longevity. So I wanted to be more lean. And I think we were probably one of the first brands at the time that actually had athletes who got abs and were quite lean, quite good looking, sort of most blokes would have liked to have looked like that and their girlfriends would have liked them to have looked like that as opposed, and it's really common now, but 15 years ago, you didn't see the guys were kind of bigger. Well, if you think, men's fitness and the bodybuilding mags, the bodybuilding mags kind of turned into men's fitness and Flex turned into muscle and fitness and turned into men's fitness. It turned into men's health. And it's sort of, health just became bigger. And we were right at the start of that and definitely helped with that. So timing, amazing. And then we just focused on making supplements that people got benefit from. And that was it. And before you knew it, 4 years later, we got the business is valued at 35 million. We did a private equity deal.
So 4 years. I'm just slowing down here just to get it, because we've started from spare bedroom to desert in Vegas.
Yeah.
So and we probably got there in 10 seconds. Yeah. So it's that spare bedroom, it grew very, very, very quickly once you'd created your first product there.
Yeah, I guess so. And I suppose looking back, it looked quick. But remember, I had a distribution business in health and fitness for 20 years. So people always look at Grenade as like an overnight success, but I think it was a 30-year overnight success because I'd been in the fitness industry over 20 years when we created Grenade, so I probably knew what not to do. I didn't know what I was doing, but I think I knew what not to do. We knew what it didn't. We didn't want it to be. We didn't want it to be, a bodybuilding brand. And again, we just kind of went around the world and had fun. And then and we looked at the market, for instance. So our first ever show, Body Power, May 2010. We're kind of launching Grenade to the world. It's been on the market for a few months and, just trickling along and, people kind of think it's quirky and whatever, think it's quite gimmicky because it was, but the whole industry was gimmicky. And we've got a show coming up and we think we need to be at this show because not a lot was happening. And we thought we'd just launch it and go bonkers because it was a good product, but, it didn't. So we had a couple of customers and distribution customers. And the reviews that were trickling in were sort of slow, but the reviews were good. Remember as well, this is kind of pre-Instagram and pre-social media, really. Facebook's really around, but it's kind of it's more. You need to be in shops, you need to be in stores, and it was more health. The sports nutrition market then was certainly more specialised and focused than it is now. You've got GNC stores. Well, GNC stores don't exist in the UK anymore. There's thousands in the US, but they've declined a lot over the last 10 or 15 years. Now you can go and buy supplements in your local supermarket, almost your local your local petrol station. So, that wasn't the case.
That's where I pick up my Grenade. Yeah, exactly. I literally pick up a Grenade milkshake and a Grenade Oreo bar in my local little Asda on the go.
We'll come back to that because that was a very, very conscious decision that was not popular at the time, but we'll come back to that. So remind me about that point. So with the show coming up, we've got literally no money to spend. We've got a few £100. So because I'm interested in the military, I know people who own tanks and armoured vehicles and whatever, so I ring one of them up. Any chance I can borrow a tank? Yep, how many do you want? Just the one will do. So we say a tank, it's an Abbott self-propelled gun. So for all the purists out there who always go, it's not a tank. I know it's not a tank, it's a self-propelled gun, but it's a big armoured vehicle and it's got a big gun on it. So for the lay person, they think it's a tank, right? But it's a self-propelled gun. So And we ring up like Body Power and say, we can't really afford a booth this year, but we're thinking about bringing a tank in. So if we do that and we go to all the trouble of bringing this in and logistically getting it there, can we kind of just blag some space that no one else wants? Because we can only really we can't be in the middle of the hall because we're not going to get it there. So we need to be just near a door to get this thing in. They went, yeah, you'll never get that in there, but yeah, fine. So we arranged to get it in and we drive this Abbott self-propelled gun into the NEC, billowing smoke, setting all the smoke alarms off and stuff. And everyone's like, oh God, Grenade have arrived. And we just stole the show. Because if you think, all the other brands have all got lots of money to spend. So what do? They go and spend lots of money. And they've all got, fitness girls dancing around. But you think, yep, seen it. They're working with race teams, they're bringing in Formula One cars, but the dream and the joy of a Formula One car is seeing it race around a track at 200 miles an hour, not sitting stationary in an exhibition hall. So, they bring these cars and stuff in and they build entire booths that you could live in that are hundreds of thousands of pounds. And we're just standing in front of an Abbott self-propelled gun. And we got about 12 quid left over, so we bought 2 T-shirts.
Tank into NEC. Yeah. Sorry, we just had a little pause because of the camera.
Yeah. So we've got literally no money to spend. So we spend our last 12 quid on 2 Grenade T-shirts, like 6 quid each, which I think I've probably still got my original Grenade T-shirt, just through to the loom ones. And we sort of stood there and we waited to see what would happen. And people were just fascinated by it. And again, it was just at the start of social media. And it was probably one of the only things not one of the only things in the show that was photo worthy, but everyone took a picture of that. So everyone took a picture of our vehicle with our branding on it and put it on social media. So, because why wouldn't you, back in the day? And we had there was an American distributor there as well who was walking the show. He'd not walking around the show for the first time in the UK, and he said this would sell well in the US. And we're 3 months in, and we've got interest in the US. And and at the time, it felt amazing. With hindsight, really, it was terrible because we're not on our local shop down the road. So why are we thinking about the US? But at the time, we were so fearless and naive and stupid. You do all this crazy stuff, don't you? And we ultimately ended up doing a deal with them, and we ended up a year later in the US. And we had the buyers were there of Holland and Barrett, and which was who owned the GNC stores in the UK. And then slowly but surely, we did the hand-to-hand combat of just getting into stores. And sort of 2 or 3 years later, with our supplements, we were kind of in all the stores that we could be in, and the business was great. We'd got what I would call a nice lifestyle brand. Everyone thought we were a lot bigger than we were. We got this amazing cult following, but you just touched on it a minute ago. We were in some of the supermarkets, but with products that were £50 or £60, it was quite an educated or expensive purchase for most people. People don't tend to walk around supermarkets and go, oh, no, I'll just spend 60 quid on something I didn't know I wanted. So we, around about 2013, 2014, I decided that we've got this brand everyone loves. It's really trusted. The sports nutrition stuff we do is brilliant. We're working with all these elite football teams and special forces and people that really know are using this stuff, and it's informed sport, and it's kind of the best supplements you can get. But, do we have millions of people using it? No, we need to go and find those people. So we made a conscious decision back then to put everything we learned about product and brand and retail into a bar, and based into something that everyone could afford, because we're selling protein, tubs of protein and protein shakes and so on, but then to have something that was kind of a bit more portable and, more importantly, cheaper. So we thought, actually, a lot of people were coming up to us and going, I love your stuff, but I can't afford it. Whereas people going to petrol stations have got 2 or 3 quid to spend, aside from fuel. And, what were they buying? Probably buying a pasty, a Red Bull, a sandwich.
Greggs.
So actually, Greggs. So we thought, you know what? If we can put our product into these locations, with our branding and stand out, I think this will sell. The difficult point was we didn't have a protein bar, and no one made a good protein bar. So, we didn't invent protein bars, but we invented good ones. And again, because I grew up, the first gym I worked at when I was 14, 15 years old was in Sturchley, up the road from Cadbury's. I grew up with that sort of smell and the smell of chocolate when I was training. And I thought, well, I wonder if we could just kind of make a protein bar that tasted more like a chocolate bar as opposed to a dog chew. And it was the old mantra years ago. People would say, well, if it's good for you, it shouldn't taste nice. It's not supposed to taste nice. It's good for you. You think, who made that up? Someone made that up who got a product that tasted shit, made that up. So basically 42 attempts later at making protein bars, and 2 years. So between sort of Easter 2013 and Easter 2015, worked on a protein bar. And someone said to them, so you had 42 failures. Not really. I learned 42 ways that we didn't want to make a protein bar that we wanted. So, and I said to them, failure's a bruise, not a tattoo. You either, you fail or you learn. So, we learned how to make these bars, and everyone was dead against it. And our board at the time were like, no, we've kind of invested in the sports nutrition brands, not a sort of a small food brand, a protein bar brand. And I said, look, I'd buy these bars. I think these bars are good. And the board's really quite split. And then I just sort of edged it really by saying, one of the guys said, look, you've kind of got a nose for these things, so we should kind of trust your judgment. And I said, look, if these don't sell, I'll buy more. So, and we'd ordered 50,000 bars. So I'd have been eating them like for the next 10 years. So I underwrote it.
But you at that point, you owned the company for nearly fully? Or did you,
no, we would
is that when responsibilities start creeping in?
Yeah, that's when adults turn up and you get private equity involvement, and all of a sudden you have to justify decisions and spending money and whatever, and you start to become more formal and professional, which isn't a bad thing. I'm glad we did that. And again, I learned a lot. That's been the most of the learning, because it was, transitioning from kind of the Wild West into, a proper business. It's got to be done delicately and carefully. So, and we did it through protein bars. So, launched these protein bars in 2015. and sold them in 2 hours. And then the next batch that came again were sort of pre-sold before they turned up, as were the next batch, and we did a different flavour, and we were basically sold out until about the middle of 2017. No matter how many bars we had on order, we just keep pre-selling them, and we got like 10 million on order at one point, and they were all pre-sold. And it's not an easy business in terms of, we make a product that's got a shelf life on it and they don't get better with time, and we were shipping around the world, and there's nothing worse than shipping stuff that melts to hot countries in the summer. So we've had loads of fun and games with it, but slowly but surely we became the number one selling protein bar in the UK really quickly, but that wasn't that difficult, if I'm totally honest, because it was such a small number.
UK's a small island.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So we were kind of big fish in a small pond, I guess. The interesting thing to me then was around about 2018 when we started getting the radar of actually other confectionery products. So we thought, it's one thing being the number one selling pre-workout in sports nutrition, because you're just comparing yourself to sports nutrition stuff. But I was thinking, we'd already got a taste of this from our fat loss days, where we're thinking, okay, we know we're the number one weight loss product in sports nutrition, but where does that sit, in health and beauty in the UK on Amazon? And we were like, we'd be ranked number one in health and beauty, or number one in food on Amazon. And again, Amazon 10 years ago isn't Amazon that it is today, but you'd have 60, 70,000 items sat in that category, and we're the best seller. And now with our bars, again, we'll be like the number one selling item in food on any given day, and coffee will be number two, and there'll be like, perhaps dairy milk.
You're the number one seller of food in any given day.
Oh, on any given day, yeah. Or we'll always be top five. I can't remember the last time we were out of the top five. And the point being, so we sort of sell boxes, we sell bars in store, and we sell we sell bars in store, and we sell boxes online. And that's grenade.com or Amazon or whatever. But the interesting thing to me was when I realised here that we could disrupt confectionery, and that's not what we set out to do. But when you look back and look, I love chocolate. Most people love chocolate. I grew up with Cadbury. Love it. I'd sit and eat chocolate all day.
You got a Cadbury's machine in the house.
Cadbury's machine in the house. Love it. Love the brand. 200 years old actually this week, Cadbury. And real affinity for it. Probably one of the most loved, best known British brands. But as we know about training and health, should you be eating it every day? No, of course not. It's more of a treat. But you thought, actually, I wonder if we could give people an alternative, and we could just capture some of the people who are falling away from chocolate just because, they're of sugar, or they're diabetic, or that, for health reasons or whatever. And we could just capture some of those people. And then when you look back, this is like 2018. When you look back at, say, some of the chocolate bars around, like the new kid on the block was Whisper, that was like the mid 1980s. No one had launched a chocolate bar in decades, really, because I guess it's really competitive. And it was just ripe for someone like us to come along and just disrupt it.
Because none of them had done it.
No, and I think, and again, had they looked at doing this, and a few of them had tried with protein bars, but they weren't a particularly good protein bar, and they also weren't a good chocolate bar. And I believe you need to be one or the other. You can't be kind of a hybrid of both necessarily. So, Mars had sort of tried it, but you ended up with a protein bar that was relatively high in sugar, but wasn't as nice as a Mars bar. So people were saying to me, what do you think? And I'd go, well, I'd just eat a Mars bar. Or I'd probably have a better protein bar, but I wouldn't eat that. You'd think, but this is my point about where people sit round and create a product of what they think people might like. You've got to be really careful asking people what you think they want, because they tell you, and most people don't know what they want. So I learned this actually I learned this through Virgin, and when they were saying about Virgin Airlines and some of the things they ask consumers. If you say to consumers, what do you want out of air travel? They want to travel everywhere quicker, in first class, and cheaper, and a lot of these things aren't really doable for an airline, so therefore they don't really learn much, and you don't get a very useful survey. But yeah, sort of in 2018 we found out, we started buying this IRI data, and we found out that we were the fourth best selling chocolate bar in the UK, and I think dairy milk might have been fifth. We were fourth, and then it was kind of like Snickers, Ferrero, and Mars maybe, like I forget the order. I think Snickers was number two actually. And I thought, I wonder if we could actually do it, just get this to number one. So from that point on, I was just obsessed with data and getting in as many places as possible, because a lot of the places we were selling, like GNC, Holland and Barrett, Amazon, they weren't measured markets. We were in lots of gyms and health stores, but that data wasn't obtainable, whereas the data from the big grocers and the petrol stations and so on was. And again, all around this time when we started with protein bars, you mentioned about the buying from petrol station. At their peak, there were 60 GNC health stores in the UK. There were 10,000 petrol stations. So we ran out of white space for supplements. Everywhere that we could put Grenade, we were. And it was great, but I was looking at all the places that we weren't. And again, entrepreneur logic, my drive home at the time was driving from Solihull back to Stratford. And I said to the guys, on my drive home, anywhere that sells a Mars bar and Red Bull, I want to be able to go in and buy a Grenade bar. That's the mission. So Costa Coffee, tick, Londis, tick, BP, tick, Shell, tick. So we ticked them off. And we had a team of probably about 12 people at the time, and we got a list of all the UK petrol stations, and we're like, right, they've got 500 petrol stations, they've got one.
Just call up the Islam brothers and be like, excuse me.
Well, fun enough, we did. So, and actually I talked to Moshin a lot. I've got a lot of time for Moshin. Again, great entrepreneur. And also and of course, when he wants protein bars, what's Moshin do? Text me, send me some protein bars. So I'm like, they're in all of your stores.
It is amazing, isn't it?
But the thing is, entrepreneurs back and respect other entrepreneurs. Plus, it's quicker for him to text me than probably go on Amazon or go into one of his stores. But there's just this mutual respect around entrepreneurs that, again, you could do a whole of the podcast around, which is fantastic because we just get on.
And it's
powerful.
On that, then, you've mentioned you've been fortunate enough. You're Virgin Startup Mentor. Is that correct?
That's correct, yeah.
You spent time with Richard Branson. So for someone...
Branson, not Branston. Branston, mate, pickle.
You spent time with Richard.
You got to tell him. You got to tell him.
Well, it's that illiterateness, isn't it?
Yes.
Prick. When you spend time around someone like that, you are a very successful, despite the fact that you say that you're not entrepreneur, in many tens of thousands, if not millions of people's eyes, to get to where you've got to today and done what you've done with an amazing brand and a product in a sector that a lot of people love. When you spend time with someone that has another company, so let's just take someone like Richard and Virgin, that's a bigger business, turns over more, does that is it just the turnover you're looking at for why you're following Richard or looking at what he's doing in his story? And you mentioned they're going to space. Would you then, because of the fact that there's more, think that he's someone that you want to kind of aim towards? What is it? Where do you get your next steps up the ladder is what I'm getting from. And why? Is it other than turnover and size of company?
Yeah, I've never been bothered about turnover.
Does he think different?
Yeah, I mean, he's got this amazing energy that it's amazing to be around and see it. And it's amazing to see what his capabilities are and aren't. And he knows exactly what they are. And again, he's been very, very good at getting people around him who are just better at doing certain things and working with them. And actually just, he's really nice and genuinely cares about people. So you can't help but just be impressed by it and respect it. And I think what I like about that business and that brand is they've just gone past their sort of 50th year, probably getting closer to 60 years, really. And, it's become they've really had to diversify multiple times. It's a great example of how a brand has they built up trust and then they've applied that trust to all these different sectors and made it work. Whereas really that should have been a one-trick pony. And if they hadn't diversified, well, actually, Richard said to me, if we hadn't diversified years ago, we'd still have record stores. And I said to him, no, you wouldn't. He said, no, you're right. Actually, we wouldn't have record stores because record stores aren't really a thing anymore. So it hadn't really occurred to him that what he wouldn't have if they hadn't diversified. So I think that's what I admire the most. I mean, there's certain businesses now, through social media, I do think it's possible to just kind of get lucky. I think you can be the right place, the right time, which I think we were the right place, the right time. Did we get lucky? No, we worked our asses off. And the harder we worked, the luckier we got. Were we in a point in time where people were a bit more health conscious? Yes, we couldn't really have changed that. We helped it, but we didn't create that. There are certain businesses, again, that would have done better 10 years ago, would do better in 10 years' time. And again, through no fault of their own, they're in a period where, they don't work these days. But I think with Virgin, for example, they've navigated this over 50 plus years. you don't trade over 50 years in business without learning a lot, having scars, getting knocked back, having failures, reinventing yourself. You that's kind of how you learn. It's very, very impressive.
You learn by doing.
Yeah, certainly. Like I said, I mentioned Cadbury's 200 years old this week. And imagine the history and what they've learned there. Because also, like, we look back. Many of us remember the successes. There's way more failures than successes. We've had loads of product that just haven't worked.
You've mentioned lots of times where you've had high moments. I mean, the ability to be able to think, do you know what, I'm going to solve the problem of me being impatient in my time by buying a helicopter. Problem solved. It's still problem solving, but it's fucking cool. A lot of the stuff that me and my amazing assistant Steve have seen today has been effing cool. And it's nice to picture what your childhood was like to now see what you've been able to obtain these days. But
you've seen me go out and buy toys that I wanted when I was a child and my parents couldn't afford. So I went and bought stuff 40 years later. But weirdly, sorry to cut in, but then one of the things I've shown, say, my mom, do you remember when I wanted this toy at like Christmas? Like, I got one, a boxed one or whatever. And she's like, no, I don't remember that. And I was like, I was really hoping you'd go, yeah. I was hoping there's more of a story than that there. And they go, yeah, I remember, we couldn't have afforded this. I'm ever so glad you've got one now. She's looking at your mum doesn't remember anything. It's interesting that these things stick with you and you think one day I'll do it. Like, I'm really into my shooting and I was never allowed to have an air rifle or a gun. I always loved toy guns as a kid. And again, as soon as I was old enough, shotguns, firearms, rifles, you do just like clay pigeon shooting. And I got lots of friends are all in the military. So love all that target shooting and stuff like that. You just go and do the things that you can't do when you're younger.
So there's all those high moments of things that you couldn't do when you were younger. In your journey, as you've mentioned, things aren't easy. There's 42 learning lessons of protein bars that didn't work to get to the one that did. What would you say has there ever been for someone that sits so confidently opposite with so much energy, so much logic, so much passion? Has there ever been a day that you get knocked back?
All the time.
And you thought, fuck, I just can't all do the time. This anymore.
Do you know, I think, again, you could do a whole podcast about this probably. Everyone has highs and lows. And I suspect the high-performing, successful people probably have lower lows than other people you wouldn't necessarily expect. The reason being is, simple logic. The higher the high, the lower the low. And I think you mentioned earlier about, we were chatting about, your mom and about having a sense of purpose. Having a sense of purpose is absolutely critical, and your sense of purpose will change. So my sense of purpose has changed 15 times probably over the last 15 years. I'm very obsessive. You can tell that. If I'm going to do something, I'll go and do it properly, or I just won't bother because I'm actually inherently quite lazy. So I'm happy just not to do anything, or I'll be like, balls out, I will go for this until it kills me sort of thing. I don't have any grey area in the middle. And absolutely, when you don't have something, yes, you want to obtain it. When you then potentially do obtain it, yeah, you want to potentially obtain something else because these targets move. And also you worry about not having it. So in terms of, creation of wealth, for instance, it kind of does one thing. Creating wealth gives you options, and lots of people probably shouldn't have those options, or you have to learn how to evaluate those options. Take into account lottery winners, people who one day, overnight, become a multimillionaire. And there are cases of people who've gone out and bought 3 helicopters. And you think, I sort of see why they've done it, but they're bankrupt in a year because they just went and bought something they might have always wanted. But buying stuff's easy. Managing it and maintaining it, certainly in the case of a helicopter, flying it, using it, is a whole different ball game. And it's really easy to waste money on things as well. So I'm really pleased, I think, of how I've learned along the journey. And then I know the value of a fiver, so I've never forgotten that because I used to earn minimum wage. So I was earning less than £2 an hour in my late teens. It wasn't that long ago. It was like 27 years ago. So it was a poor wage then. So I used to fill my car with petrol. every day because I was scared if it got to half a tank or less, I couldn't afford to put the fuel in. So every day at the petrol station, I put £3 in. So you learn these kind of tricks, and then you start to appreciate, this stuff, and you appreciate stuff more. If someone just inherited money or won the lottery, I sort of think it's probably almost a curse. I know it sounds stupid because it's amazing, but I'm not sure how much they learn.
Do you have the skills?
You have to obtain this kind of discipline, how to deal with people. You mentioned in my house, I had a party here. I had one party for my 40th. Hundreds and hundreds of people came. And the following day, just about everyone messaged me and said exactly the same thing. They just said, what an amazing bunch of people. And I've got people there who are billionaires, and I've got people here who work for the council and collect rubbish, but they're all my friends. And I've kept this amazing network of people over the last 30 plus years, and I'd like to think I haven't really changed. I'm still sort of the same person, but this discipline and how you interact with people as well is kind of really powerful, because I'm super conscious of ever looking crass, but then again I also don't want to apologise for the rest of my life for having worked hard, because I've had people say to me, I wouldn't buy that car, I wouldn't share that car because what will the staff think? I think, well, the staff see me go in really early first and leave last, so if my staff don't think I work hard, they're probably not the right team. But you do you have to become conscious of this stuff, because you have to be respectful that people are in different situations, and also but I also don't want to spend the rest of my life worrying about what other people think.
Okay, but in that process, where's been a moment that you've had to learn something really new, like a mental skill, quickly to get yourself out of a rut?
Okay, so while I think about that, in terms of some of the lows, I'll give you an example, for instance, of, say, when we did that Mondelez deal, and we'd worked day and night for this deal for months, and I mean 7 days a week, 15, 16, 18 hours a day, just brutal. I actually ended up with sort of health issues in terms of the fact I damaged my own neck from spending so long sat at my desk. You wouldn't think it was possible, would you? But I had real neck problems for a year after that deal. And I've actually got pictures of the day after that deal when I woke up and I looked like I've been beaten up. You'd be like, you wouldn't think it was the same person. These are just monumentally brutal things to go to. And I think I was so obsessed with getting across the finish line, and we had a choice really between Mondelez, Cadbury, or Ferrero, because Ferrero wanted to buy it as well. What an amazing position to be in. But we hadn't really thought about what would happen the day the deal went over the line. And then all of a sudden, is that it? Have I just got a job now? Where's my brand gone? And there was a big, probably a low there at that point that week. I think just because all of a sudden the deal's done, you've got these amazing new partners, and they're fantastic, the best partners you could ever wish for. And it's great. And there's tons of stuff to look forward to. We knew we'd do Oreo and we've gone and done it. But part of you just thinks, what have I done? You feel like you've lost an arm. So, because, that was my baby. So, and I'd still got shares, and I still have. And I'm one of these people, if I'm, as I said, I'm either all or nothing. So if I've got 1% of the shares or 100% of the shares, I'll treat it the same, and until I'm not there, until I'm out. So it was amazing. But, and you've got so many people saying, well done. One of the first emails, Mosh and Issa, amazing job, mate, well done, blah, blah, blah. Richard Branson, fantastic, so pleased for you, well done for creating such a valuable brand. They just go on and on and on. And all these business icons, multiple billionaires that you look up to going, well done, it's so difficult to do this, congratulations. And the more people that congratulate you, kind of the worse you feel, because you just sort of
oh, it's really gone now.
Well, I think they're probably almost happier than I am. And it wasn't that I was kind of unhappy as such. It was just, I need a moment here to pause. And you kind of don't get one. And I think this was on the Monday, the Tuesday morning, the story broke. And I was having a bit of a sort of a flat week in terms of people congratulating us. And then on the Friday, a friend of mine sent me a message who, James Benamore, he founded Amigo Loans, floated it for $1.5 billion. Again, had free school meals as a kid. Really, really clever guy. And we all need a bit of a mentor and someone to go, should I be feeling like this? Is this normal or whatever? He is so perceptive. I hadn't heard from him all week. And he was so perceptive. He let all the congratulatory stuff kind of die down. And he messaged me on a Friday afternoon. I was actually out for a walk and I was kind of a bit fed up. It was the weekend. And also, I'd gone from then these 18-hour days. I got a weekend off and I didn't know what to do with it because that wasn't the norm. And then you feel guilty then because you think, well, I should be working. And also, your new partners are paid hundreds of millions of pounds and you think I should be working. You find it really hard then not to switch off. And he messaged me, and I've still got the message on my phone, actually. I'll show you after this. And he said something along the lines of, you'll be getting loads of congratulations, which is right, because it's really difficult what you've done. But if you kind of feel a bit flat, that's okay too. It's normal. And I was like, oh, God, thank God for that. I thought there was something wrong with me, because you just think, why am I kind of feeling down? There's more money here than I could ever spend. But that wasn't really the goal. So, he sent me this amazing message. And I just thought, oh, God. And a weight was lifted. And I rang him and said, oh, God, you've got no idea how much you needed to hear that. And we often talk about it. He said, oh, I've been through it. And it's like just that experience and that learning. And again, now I think it's what entrepreneurs stick together. I went up to see Moshin at Asda a few months back, just before Christmas actually, and we sat in his office, and he owns Asda, and we sat there on a Friday afternoon, sort of chatting about cars, and you just think like, it's bonkers. And what are you going to do now? He said, oh, I don't know what I want to do really. It's worth $6 billion. The danger is you kind of end up on this treadmill. And you think, well, go and do something else. And it's not about greed or wanting more money or whatever. You get used to achieving.
Do you think you're trying to mentally facilitate yourself? Or your brain, try and keep your brain at a level where you stay happy.
Because like I said, because I'm lazy. So the tricky thing then is this discipline that you learn over the years. You have to really sort of learn how to manage it. And also, I don't want to look back. I don't have any regrets really. And you said earlier about like problems, and these things are problems. I don't sort of mind problems because problems always have solutions. What you don't want is a dilemma, because dilemmas are trickier to navigate, a dilemma. But look, I don't want to look back and go, oh, I wish I'd done that. Oh, why didn't I do that?
Why didn't I get my helicopter license?
Because lots of people do. So now, like, I never think about it, I do it. And when I look back and some of the stuff I'm doing, I've trekked the Alps with Richard Branson and his family and chatting about business for hours and hours and hours, and I've snowmobiled in the Antarctic, and I've got my mates in special forces, and we go and do crazy stuff, and I've driven supercars and learned to fly a helicopter, learned to fly a plane, been in a plane crash. I've been doing stuff through the Everglades and going, been to Russia, and who's going to Russia nowadays? No one's going there. All these things. I flew a helicopter down the runway at NASA when you could sort of do that. And I haven't actually got a bucket list, but I didn't start to create a bit of a bucket list, things to do before you die. And, I'll tell you one of them, what's not going to be in there, and that's sitting at a fucking desk. He's not going to be there. Because what you don't want to do is look back and go, I wish I hadn't spent all those years sort of sat at that desk. So I think you get your life in chunks, don't you? And you make each one work for you, and you kind of go to the next stage. But I think, I'm probably terrified of standing still, as most entrepreneurs probably are.
What is the difference between being a founder and a CEO that reports to a board?
Okay. I think founder... It's probably the DNA of the brand, I guess. Founder mentality, like I said earlier, brands are always extensions of their founders. So, I guess you mean a founder in terms of having 100% of the shares and all the decision-making ability. Weirdly as well, we've been quite fortunate in the sense that all the private equity backing that we've had, and we've done 2 rounds of private equity and then a trade deal with Mondelez. The best, smartest thing they've kind of done is actually just let us get on with it. And even with Mondelez now, yes, we're in Bourneville Place, we're in the office, but we've got our own floor. And actually one of their senior guys from Mondelez said to me a week ago, I don't know who does what at Grenade, but it just works. And that was it. And he's right. And it's clever. They now know, I think, and they've said this to me as well, the best thing you can do when you partner with some of these brands is just to let them do it and just back that person and back that team. And I know as well where my team, do things better than I do. But actually I'm good at conducting the orchestra as opposed to running around and playing all the instruments. So I guess, another point you're making is it monumentally different? Founder, you make all the decisions, and then CEO report to a board. But actually, there does, and I know you've had sort of various experiences of this in your own life as well, but there does come to a point where it's quite nice to have some accountability, because if I didn't have that accountability, like I say to the team, anything I do, any decision I make, I have to be able to justify to myself. I have to be able to justify it to our senior team. We call it G4, because of the four most senior people at Grenade. And then we have to be able to justify it to Mondelez if we had to. So as long as you kind of tick those boxes, fine, do what you like. But if you didn't have some checks and balances in place, I'm quite eccentric. So it's actually quite good that we probably have that bit of a framework in place to just help us make good decisions, I think.
Less of a chance of making a decision you'd have to fix. I
think so. I mean, we came up with this phrase before about we always like being disruptive, but disruptive doesn't mean being disrespectful. And, we've had instances in the past with the team where something's happened and actually, it's kind of backfired, and the way we've handled it's backfired. And it's been disruptive, but in a disrespectful way. And again, it comes back to this learning. So every time something happens, then you learn from that and you kind of put a check and balance in place. Doesn't mean to say that you have all of your creative freedom stifled. Far from it. We flew a hot air balloon past Glastonbury. Last year we drive the tank through London. We park outside Westminster. We still do all the stuff that we used to do. I think changes that are coming now with the brand that we have to be more careful of aren't to do with kind of ownership and reporting and who our partners are, because they want us to do more of the same. I think now we have to just be a bit more mindful that the world is changing. So if the world changes and we don't, that's where you can fall foul of some of this stuff. So we're sensitive, for instance. Again, you've got a lot of the world in conflict. Now, through the whole life of Grenade, there's always been conflict. We traded all through Iraq and Afghanistan and all these different conflicts around the world in the Middle East. Now some of these are kind of close to home. It doesn't change me the way I think, because I still think as well, actually, I'm actually not pro-war. I'm anti-war. If I could avoid conflict and stop conflict and I could wave a magic wand, I'd do it tomorrow. But because that's actually no good for business for a start. But also...
Unless you make grenades.
Yeah, but exactly. But I'm pro-military. I support what our military do. It's probably more of an American way of thinking, where they're probably more supportive of their military than we are potentially of ours. But I think, that some of the stuff that changes geopolitically has probably had a bigger impact than any sort of partner we've ever had. The last time I remember one of our business partners saying not to do something was when they said don't launch protein bars, but I just did that anyway. So, and look where that went. So, okay, I was vindicated.
And then you got drinks, the product range has expanded, the whole shebang, and we know how involved you are with the business. You've had your hands on it and it's been your baby.
Can I just say as well, actually, to flip your question, one of the reasons for getting sort of more professional partners and sort of private equity in trade, there was actually one reason that we did that back in the day. And that was because we'd got so many ideas and so entrepreneurial, and we'd got so many, rabbits that are off running in different directions. We actually hoped somebody might come in and tell us what not to do. They didn't, but we thought that might actually help, because we've had this conversation off camera before. You've got quite a few businesses running, and my instinct was to say, I'd pick one or two of these, because you're not going to be able to run them all successfully, and you sort of defended it quite well. But, sometimes it's quite nice for people to go, I'd leave that, I'd just do that, and I'd focus that. It's not bad to kind of get a bit more structure.
I try and look at them as a holistically together. So I'm like, there's the part of my brain that enjoys digital. Yes. There's the part of my brain that enjoys building and making stuff. And that's the part of my brain that enjoys branding and marketing and all the rest of it. And I kind of get that from Gertwings. I get the digital from Tweak. And then the building stuff is just like, what a self project for someone that loved fishing to build their own lake. Yeah. But I do try and understand what time is going to be divided up. And it actually is mad that the thing that gives me the smallest return at the minute, which is, in fact, this probably takes up the most time, which is mad. But
is it the most enjoyment though?
Yeah.
Okay.
By a long way, but it's also the most stress. But
yeah.
But
it's nice to meet the people though. Like, we hadn't met before today. We've obviously exchanged messages and stuff. We haven't met, but it's quite nice then meeting someone for the first time, and you can immediately have quite a lot in common.
You said a quote, or touched on a quote. It's one of my favourites.
I haven't touched you.
Which
just for the benefit of the cameras. No one has been touched in this interview.
My dad used
money
to
hasn't
say,
changed hands. Let's say.
My dad used to say, Ben, you can all the rabbits will start to run, but you can only catch one.
Yeah.
Just pick a rabbit and chase it. But when you brought in the private equity, when you're doing it, you mentioned you've got all these rabbits running everywhere. It does seem like you just want to chase after every single one of them a little bit.
Yeah,
is it like that, or is it structured?
Yeah.
And can you do that with private equity? Is that saying necessarily correct?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think because what happened was all these ideas that we had were all so good, you could have almost done any of them, and I think we couldn't quite decide. And they actually, our first private equity partners, Growth Point Capital, again, very smart, operationally savvy financial partners, they weren't qualified in the fitness industry to come and say, I wouldn't do that. When they did sort of say not to do something, they told me not to do the one thing that's fundamentally made Grenade a business 10 times the size. So the point is that no one knows this stuff. You just have to have a real belief in it. And if you're enjoying it, Steve Barratt always says this. I'm partner with Steve in a fund called Flight Fund, and we chat about this stuff a lot. And I've learned a lot through chatting to Steve and sort of and vice versa. But where we've had various partners in different businesses, and you kind of learning along the journey and things you do differently and whatever, it's really interesting to get sort of different people's perspectives on things, and where you're learning stuff, and again where you're having fun. I think as long as you're having fun and thoroughly enjoying it, what's the worst that could happen? So now I'm sort of getting more laid back, I think, with some of this stuff, and no one knows the answers to these things, like I've said. So I think, we haven't really touched on it yet, but I think the ability sometimes to realise when something's not working is quite powerful, whether it's people you've employed as well, or a project that you've set off and you've put a lot of time into it, so you don't want to stop doing it, but it's not really going to work, or it's taking longer than you thought, it's stopping you doing the things. So, it all just comes back to this discipline I keep talking about, of just learning and then thinking, do you know what?
Is that the military mindset though?
Yeah, potentially, because I don't think you'd want to commit to a bad military operation. I actually, and if it's not going well, you need to learn when to stop and retreat. You don't just keep pushing blindly forward, but people do with business. So I quite like the military analogies, and having friends in the military, because it keeps me grounded. And buying tanks, but it does keep me grounded. But you just think there, actually, what would be the most efficient way of doing this, and you do think of it like a more of a military operation for sure.
For a bit of fun, has there been a moment, because we've seen, as you mentioned, Grenades marketing is disruptive, chaos almost, some would say.
Yeah, there's a method to the mayhem.
There's a method to the mayhem. Have you ever walked into your board or walked in a group and said, right, I've had this idea, but just bear with me? Like, where do these ideas get born from?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is, it just comes down to just this inherent ability I've got as well of just not liking being told what to do and just doing things that you shouldn't really do, but you can probably get away with. I mean, the first time we drove the armoured vehicle through London, I just thought, does it say anywhere? Because when we sort of first floated the idea, the obvious question you'll get back when you chat to sensible people at Grenade, and yes, there are some, they just go, well, hadn't we been given permission? Well, off who? Because they'll just say no. If you go to the council and go, can I drive a tank for London? They're just going to say no. So we learned, again, you always want forgiveness, not permission. Do things with a smile on your face, and you can actually get away with quite a lot, provided you conduct yourself properly, or high vis, or leaking oil underneath Marble Arch or whatever. But taking a military vehicle through London, it was congestion charge exempt, it was tax exempt. It was like classic military insurance that was like 50 quid a year. It was like, it was exempt from all the rules, because someone at some point probably thought, no one will do this. So there's probably a rule for it now, because we've probably meant they've had to create one. We've got a few things coming up that I can't talk about because it'll ruin the surprise. But I think if you can kind of wow and delight people and kind of do it sort of cheekily,
you'll get away with it.
Yeah, I mean, for instance, when there was the whole M&S, Aldi, Colin the Caterpillar, the trademarking issue that kind of made the news because it got sued. They M&S sued Aldi for sort of allegedly copying them, I should say, and whatever. So we just did like a spoof, Colin the Carb Killer, and we just took one of our carb killers and put a Colin in the front of it, and we just put that out there because you got two big brands arguing over a cake, And we just thought, so we kind of always like to be somewhere we'll just take the piss. So we just said, should we? And we just did that. Oh, millions and millions and millions of views. And then just stupid stuff we've done. I've ended up on Lad Bible and whatever. And we've had some great PR on there. But I think with Grenade, fundamentally, because we're having fun and we enjoy it, there's something quite nice living vicariously through people who are having fun and enjoying it. And I think people come to see us as kind of like, the cheeky underdog who've now got this monumental partner that own Oreo. And now we've joined forces. So we've got this enormous purchasing power, manufacturing power, global distribution power, but they're still letting us be us, which is kind of quite nice, really. So I'm looking forward to doing some different stuff with the team. Well, we've got a guy that's going to be doing Everest this year, and you're thinking in isolation, that's probably not necessarily that exciting for a brand. But I've got this idea, whereas as he's climbing Everest, we're doing it with him. So I basically want to go to Step Mill, put it in HQ, and if he's climbing, we're climbing. So basically, anything he's wearing, we're wearing, and then basically as he's going up there, and then we can't simulate the cold, but we can simulate the altitude. So we'll get an altitude mask on some of the team, and my finance, they don't know this yet, by the way, but my finance team, by the way, are going to be trekking up Everest in terms of the number of steps and stuff. Because I think it's kind of makes it a bit more relatable and just makes it more interesting, doesn't it, to kind of get involved.
And is that your brainchild?
Yeah, because we just chatted about it last week, and I'm just one of these people. I can't just sit and watch football. I just can't watch stuff. I can't, like motor racing, I couldn't sit and watch, it's too boring. If you're there taking part in the action, exactly. But like I said, I don't really watch much TV. I just can't really watch stuff. I can't sit still.
I think you've got ADHD.
Oh, definitely. But I think most people probably have nowadays.
I think most entrepreneurs.
Oh, definitely.
That
yeah.
I meet. When did you go? I want to touch on it, especially as the fact that, as I mentioned, own a digital agency. I love digital. I love marketing. When did you make the decision to go online? We'll kind of keep it brief, but and what was that a major turning point for the business or a new
was
thing?
Because that's actually if my passion and focus and love for business and brand and entrepreneurialism is my superpower, then the digital for me is kind of my kryptonite. I was kind of quite anti-digital for quite a long time, so I was actually. Although saying that, we were one of the first people to recognise Amazon in the UK and partnering with Amazon. But actually, I only became an Amazon consumer probably about 10 years ago because I quite liked buying things in stores and supporting stores. Infrastructure's got better, deliveries have got better and stuff, certainly with digital. But yeah, Grenade was never set up as a digital brand. It was actually quite the opposite. We set up to be a product that was sold in store with some assistance originally because it was this, £60 weight loss product. And as digital's become more prevalent, and I guess as stores have struggled much, I think the frustration around working with retail's amazing. It's really powerful, and we're on the shelf of just about every store in the UK, probably 200,000 plus distribution points in the UK alone and counting. So if there's a shelf, we'll be on it. But I think the frustration with retail is it's quite slow. So they'll have a range review once every year, maybe twice a year, and you could have the very, very, very best product imaginable that, is a unicorn of products that consumers are going to love, and it's amazing margin for you and it's amazing margin for the consumer. But you've probably got a 6-month wait until the range review. And you just sat there and sat there and sat there. The nice thing now is, as soon as we've got a product ready, it's on .com or it's on Amazon. It's available to the masses kind of quite quickly. And when we've learned with digital for us, we've got a new guy that started. So he's been about 18 months now, 2 years. Cameron, head of digital, who's superb. Took us quite a long time probably to find him. And Grenade was an unusual proposition online because we're already in all the stores. So, but like I said before, sell bars in store, sell boxes online. And again, we've learned how to fish in different pools. Before, if you just keep casting the same message out to everybody, you just keep sort of reaching the same people, but you're probably just stealing people who are buying from you anyway, or people that were going into Tesco's now, you're just stealing them and they're buying it online. We found a way of doing it where we actually keep everyone. I mean, for instance, this year, Grenade.com is now the same size as Amazon, which probably 3-4 years ago, we were like a tenth of the size of Amazon.
Just for some people that get confused then in terms of revenue of their product.
Not size of Amazon in terms of revenue, but I mean,
next week, Al goes to space.
Yeah, we'll sell tens of millions on Amazon in the UK, and we'll sell tens of millions on Grenade.com. But before, we used to sell tens of millions on Amazon and nothing on Grenade.com. Okay. But this year, we've grown Amazon by 30%, so they're over the moon. And we've managed to find people who aren't shopping on Amazon, and we service them as well, who probably aren't the people that go into an Asda or a Tesco or a Costa. And you actually just, people want to buy this stuff where it's right for them. And remember, if you're hungry...
In the gym.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Yeah, we sell lots through gyms. And again, if you're hungry and in a store, if we're not there, you're buying something else. You're not going to go, well, I really want a grenade bar now, so I'll just go online, because the fastest you're going to get it is probably the next day. So, being in stores is critically important. Being online is critically important. And again, like I said, we've just learned really how to fish in different pools. And it's quite tricky, because where we've got all these different retailers, they all have to coexist, and a lot of them actually just like each other. So we want to build everyone's business and our own, but without cannibalizing one another. It's really difficult to do.
What happens when you've hit every shelf?
Where
do you go?
You have multiple locations in store. And again, I'm already thinking about this, because I talked to like the guys at Red Bull and whatever, and I had a chat with one of the guys at Red Bull last year, and he said there was still, tens of thousands of locations in store that they didn't have, and they've been trading for like 40 years. So, wow. And again, you think, let's say then, okay, you get in every shelf. Well, what about every place in the UK that employs more than 50 people? Are you there? Are you there with a fridge? In there? So are you in every gym? And again, are you on every shelf in France and Germany and the Netherlands and Scandinavia?
So do you think that process of getting to that point will outlive your reign at Grenade?
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely. Which is actually good, because a brand is never finished. And I think which is actually why I like aviation, because you can always get better at it. I think if you're one of these people who likes getting stuff done, and then you go and do it and tick a box and move on, you look for something else. So the nice thing about a brand, and Zuckerberg said this about Facebook, didn't he? It's never going to be finished. It always just evolves. So I quite like having this evolving target, and again, making this a bigger brand around the world. And, I love going to Canada and the US and seeing us on shelf there, because I get a real buzz from that.
Do you think that by not having kids, you've got further in your career than you would have done with?
I have, definitely. I've got no basis for that, because I know people have got 8 children and built monstrous businesses. How they've done it, I don't know, to be honest. Every waking moment of my life has been spent on Grenade. So if I'd had, a family, I either wouldn't have seen them, or I'd have, I don't know, maybe I'd have spent quality time with my family, and it would have made my time at work potentially more effective. I guess we'll never know.
Don't know.
But yeah, I can't imagine doing it. Because it has enabled me to be quite selfish in terms of not taking days off, not taking a salary. And certainly in the early days at Grenade, and still now really, we were horrible to compete with for our competitors, because if we were awake, we were working. And no one, people will say to us, what's the one thing that you did? What's the one thing you did at Grenade? In the first 5 years, name one thing. There was one thing. Name one thing that you did that made the big difference. So the one thing we did was everything we thought of, we did. So basically, if there was a show, we were at it with a tank. If there was a retailer to be met, we were there first in the queue. If there was samples to be made and given out, we were making samples, and they were better than everyone else's samples. If we did clothing, it was better than everyone else's. If there was a relationship to be had, we'd have the best relationship. So we left no stone unturned, because I said that point about regret. If Grenade had gone belly up, and there were plenty of times it could easily could have done that. We always said we didn't want to ever look back and just go, oh, I wish we'd done that. I know there are so many businesses nowadays that are failed or failing, and the owners can look themselves in the mirror and say they did everything they could to save that business. I can guarantee it.
Financially, are you now at a place where you don't fear security? You've got more security than you would fear about having, because I think one of the driving factors for a lot of entrepreneurs when it comes financially is, I know this from myself, that we can't help chasing those rabbits, and then suddenly a pot becomes so depleted, as I've learned.
Yeah.
In my life, and now you're like, right, I really hope it all comes back now, everything that I've done. But are you at that point? Is there a point that you get to, or do you just end up buying more stuff? Is my point. Do you understand what I'm getting at?
I think so. Are you saying that like I'm so secure with this stuff that it almost can't fail? That like you worry you'll end up with you?
Do you still have that same fear that you wake up and think, oh, I have to do this right because it could all go tits up?
I don't necessarily have a fire under me that I used to have, and I think the fear of failure and having a fire under you, and like if Grenade didn't work now, then no, I don't lose my house. If Grenade didn't work 10 years ago, I'd probably lost my house. It's nice having that fire under you. So no, but it doesn't mean to say that you don't take risks. It does come back to that sense of purpose. My sense of purpose has never really been financial or making money. It's been about having fun and making a difference and doing what I'm enjoying at the time. So I think, do I leap out of bed now and just think, we want to put another sort of 20 million on the bottom line or top line of Grenade? No, but I never did. And actually, but I'll leap out of bed now and think, I want to make Oreo the number one selling snack in the world, let's say.
Off we go.
Yeah. So could that make you then the wealthiest person in the world indirectly? Yeah, maybe, but that's not the driving factor. The wealth isn't the driving factor for me. It probably wouldn't be in my top 5, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah, actually, I think me and my partner have seen a lot today, but you're actually quite like, and I think this is connected to the military side of you as well, the way that you operate. You don't have a lot of time for anything you don't need. It's like even with your cars, you can have 30, 40, 50, 60 car collection quite easily, happily on site. You're like, well, I had a Performante, but I didn't really use it, so I just got rid of it and I got a buggy. And it's like, okay, yeah, that totally makes sense. But it's like, do you not like waste?
Yeah, I hate waste. I hate wasting money. And I always say to the team, spending money's fine, wasting money's not. Yeah, you're right. I don't like waste. You have to just justify these things. And, I've got some nice cars, but I always try and make sure I drive them. Obviously, there are people that buy these cars and just mothball them for long-term investments, which, I completely get it. But I just think, what a shame. I'd like to be sort of, to be driving.
Spank your Urus about.
No, well, weirdly, it would never have been. No, I mean, I don't really drive quick. There's something the best thing about driving a supercar, I think, is driving it around slowly. I've touched wood, haven't got any points. I
heavily disagree with that statement.
I've not really been interested in sort of in kind of like thraping cars. I don't like to hear the sound of an engine struggle or whatever. But also because I fly, we've got this. There's a theory in aviation that if you look after it, it will look after you. And again, if you blow your car up, there's probably, not a lot going to happen necessarily. Depends where you are and where it blows up. But you blow your helicopter up by mishandling the engine, you're in all sorts of shit. So I'm always quite kind to things mechanically. And I think I get that from my dad because he was a mechanic and he'd always teach you to change the oil and check the oil and you just and look after stuff. And I think we were touching on this earlier. Most stuff's made that badly nowadays that I think you have to look after it because it's, it's dying to go wrong. So I've never been one for like thraping cars around or speeding or stuff like that. I don't really get that much thrill from speed. I've done track days and stuff like that. And I just find it a bit boring after a while. I'd rather go somewhere. I'd rather go on a journey or go somewhere than just drive around in circles.
You get all your kicks from a sense of accomplishment at the end, don't you?
That's not to say all my mates have gone into like racing in a big way, entrepreneurs. And again, that's probably, obviously having the money to do it, but they've got a different sense of risk and whatever as well. They get huge amounts of enjoyment from it. That's not to say that I won't wake up in 5 years' time and I've completely changed my mind. I mean, 2 or 3 years ago, someone said to me, why don't you get a helicopter? So not interested, can't fly one. And about a month later, I thought, I might buy a helicopter. And I just completely changed my mind on it. Same with boats. I never wanted a boat until I bought 2 boats.
Your mindset on this stuff is, I take it,
it's quite erratic.
I've interviewed an Olympian called Derek Redmond. And when I was sat with Derek, once he'd done something, he had to do something totally different and then just smash it and be like first at it. Yeah. So he's just like, right, I did hurdles, did running. I was like, yeah, well, right, I'll do boxing. Or I'll learn how to ride a motorbike and be a superbike champ. And you talk to him and he's just like, wow, that's just such monumental change that most listeners and most viewers can't even comprehend that level of change in somebody's life. But You're only here once.
So you said about not liking waste. I don't like wasting days as well. It's just, apart from doing this, obviously, it's just, I had to get that one in there. It's just criminal. It is criminal though, isn't it? Because if you think,
But that's why we come to you.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah,
otherwise, I wouldn't have got where I got with the podcast.
Yeah.
To the point that we're ahead of a lot of other podcasts for the same time period. If I didn't think, well, these guys, they don't like wasting their time. That's the main thing is wasting time. So if I can just pull up outside their front door, have a cup of tea and crack on for an hour, it's going to give me a way greater chance of interviewing.
No, it's
saying, do you want to come and sit in my shed in my garden?
Yeah, but it's just smart though as well. I mean, I get asked to do a lot of podcasts and also public speaking and stuff in London. And London's a pain for me. It's kind of 3 hours each way, if you're lucky. It's really hit and miss with the traffic. It should be 2 hours, but it could be 5. And I haven't got the time just to sort of sit there. And I love London when I'm there and I'm in it, but I don't like the getting in and out of it. And I'll go down to London perhaps, a couple of times a year to see Stevie, or I'll come here. But yeah, I kind of like being in the country, and I kind of get more done. So it's a productivity thing at the moment, in terms of going and traveling and whatever.
What is, on a final thought, the last thing that you would like to do as a real big sense of accomplishment? You've sold huge shares in your business. You've hit many targets you've set yourself in front, and you have achieved loads of. You laugh, smile a little.
Yeah, because I know what it is. Because I'd do it all again.
Would you?
I'd do it again. Yeah, I'd do it again. And I think that's the thing with entrepreneurs as well. We like the journey. So I'd do it again. And I genuinely believe that what I'm going to be truly proudest of, I've got no desire to be famous whatsoever. I can't imagine anything worse. But if we said for a minute, what would make Al Barratt famous, for instance? I don't think I've thought of it yet. So I find that quite exciting, that I think one day I might just wake up and, kind of, my train of thought works now. I might just wake up and go, I know, I'll just do this. And I think that's kind of quite powerful, because otherwise you think, I don't want to sit and go, I've done it all. I've done that now. I've ticked that box. So, I think there's probably still something yet to come. And I don't know exactly what that will be, but I think that's kind of the exciting thing. I like not knowing. A lot of people, I know as well, like a job and a sense of security and the safety net under them, and they want to know, where they're going to be for the next 30, 40, 50 years or whatever, and the family. And I can't imagine anything worse than just having that level of sort of stability almost. Yeah, it's never been me. Because again, when I worked in a gym years ago, when Rover was kind of still going, a lot of the people there were like job for life. And it was my dad's generation. Oh, you got a job for life. And I know that's changing now, rightly so. But can you imagine just starting a job and doing it for 60 years and then that's it? I mean, and just not trying different things. I mean, it's
all mapped out for you.
Yeah, I would absolutely hate
You're
that.
already defined by the end.
Yeah, but you'd got, yeah, exactly. And again, they give you a clock or whatever. You spent 60 years watching the clock. What do they give you? A fucking clock? So yeah, I quite like the sort of the sense of freedom, and the sense of freedom I'm probably getting now. It's taken 30 years of work of not having much freedom, because I've been working a lot, to try and, obtain that freedom, so you can get some financial freedom to do some of the things that you want to do. But like I said to you earlier today, I think we've got a responsibility to share what we know, have learned, help others, help people on their journey, help them make the most out of their lives. And I think if we know stuff, we should share it and just not bottle it up, because I've probably forgotten more about business failure than most people might ever learn. And as much as I can, I try and mentor people and give them quick answers to things. It's difficult because I'm so busy. But we've probably got a medium of finding a way of helping more people on a bigger scale in the next sort of 12 months potentially. We can't talk too much about them because I'm under NDA, but there's probably a bigger way of helping more people, which again I'll probably find really fulfilling and enjoyable. So I quite like the idea of doing that and genuinely helping people. And the world is becoming such a shit place as well. There's so much bloody misery in that. Isn't there? That we all need to try and find a way of making things a bit better.
What has been 2 things that stand out for you in your life that you are really proud of?
Okay, not necessarily proud. 2 things that stand out. I mean, can probably be 30 years apart. So. A few years ago, I was in a plane crash. That was the late 90s. I was working at the gym, and a friend of mine who was training at the gym was building his hours up. He passed his private pilot's license, and he was building his hours up to go commercial, and it's quite expensive. So he said, if ever you want to fly anywhere, if you pay for he'll pay for a seat, and then I pay for the other sort of 3 seats on the plane. He'd take me flying. So I thought, what could possibly go wrong? Quite a lot, it turns out. So, my girlfriend at the time, her granddad lived in Cornwall, so we decided we'd fly to Bodmin to see him, to surprise him. And we basically flew a Cessna from Coventry day before Christmas Eve in, I don't know, 98, I think it's, about 97, 98, and flew the Cessna all the way down to Cornwall, landed no problems, and basically refueled and came back, and just through no fault of his own, we ran out of fuel over a potato field in Aston Cantlow. So crashed. So the headline on the Evening Mail is of Christmas Eve in like 1998 was "4 survive plane crash nightmare," which was me, my friend John, my girlfriend, and my sister at the time. And we ended up in a potato field with a faulty plane, actually. So that's
and you all walked away? Yeah,
we walked away, which again, I mean, it was quite lucky because most people probably wouldn't have done. And there was there were lots of strange coincidences actually that day. The headwind was, we were going to have a tailwind and it turned into a headwind. So the weather changed. There was a slight fault with the plane, so it was kind of burning a bit more fuel than he'd planned for. There was a dodgy fuel gauge, so there were 2 gauges on that particular plane, and one of them was still showing half full. So they call it the Swiss cheese model. It's just these things where all these coincidences line up, and the plane flies to the holes, and it's kind of called Swiss cheese. One of the biggest coincidences was, though, the field he was aiming for, he missed. We skimmed over a barbed wire fence, which again, if he'd been 2 feet lower, then we'd have all been we'll had a haircut for sure. And the field that he was aiming for, that we couldn't have seen from the air, actually wasn't as smooth as where we landed. It had actually been ploughed. The field we landed on, the ground was frozen, it hadn't been ploughed, so it was a pretty we're fortunate thing to land on, because it was almost not as good as a runway, but it wasn't like landing on bumpy grass or uneven ground. And the weird coincidence was, we spoke to the farmer that owned the field, and he'd farmed that field for over 30 years, and every single year by that date he ploughed that field, and for that particular year he didn't. And I remember saying to him, "Why didn't you do it this year?" And he said he sort of thought about it, and he went, "I don't know, I just didn't." There was no reason whatsoever. And you think, that was bizarre. And then the second thing that was weird was there was a cottage we could see in the distance, and we walked to this cottage, and it was Heart of England Balloons. It was a hot air ballooning company which did Virgin balloons.
Is that how you ended up at Glastonbury?
No, that was ended up being sort of years later. But then we ended up making a hot air balloon, and then and I thought, it would be quite cool to meet Richard Branson, so I did. So that sticks out as something that most people haven't done. And again, from that, I thought back then, when you're in a plane that's crashing, basically, because the engine's going like that, it's pretty terrifying.
Pretty good, that.
And you can't fly. It was good, wasn't it? And you can't fly. You think, oh, I'd love to be able to fly one of these. I mean, I wouldn't. There's no one who done it better than John. That he'd be super.
I could see in your eyes how happy you were with that noise as well.
It was good. Yeah, it was good, because I've done it before. Not on my first podcast. So, but after that, when I could and I got the money and the time, I went to learn to fly, just to tick a box. And I learned to fly in 2001. And passed in the minimum number of hours, and then didn't fly again for years, because I just ticked the box and think, okay, done it now, ticked it, moved forward. And that actually revalidated my license probably about 16, 17 years later, and bought a plane when I'd got, when circumstances changed and I'd got more of a use for one. So the plane thing sticks out. The second thing, probably, I've just in the throes of being made an honorary colonel in the Royal Artillery. I'm the second civilian. I'll be the second civilian actually that's ever got this. So for me, it's like it's better than a knighthood, because it's rarer, and I love the military. So I'm really pleased about doing that. And it's such an unusual path that's been trodden here. It's had to be signed off by like a major in the Royal Artillery, the brigade commander, like a 2-star
It doesn't normally
general.
Happen, yeah.
No, it's a really...
So they almost have to figure it out as they...
Yeah, they're working out how to do it, but it's got to be signed off by the head of the British Army, and then the Grant Shapps, the Defence Secretary's got to sign it off, and finally the King has to sign it off as well. So I'll hopefully get a nice little signed thing, whatever, from King Charles, who again I met a few weeks ago for something else, ironically, because we were chatting about this. And I saw my name's going to come across your desk in a few weeks. I'm an honorary colonel. And he was like, oh, who did you serve with? I said, oh, I haven't. So for a civilian to get this, it's kind of unheard of. But they want someone inspirational, more relatable for the guys. And yeah, they want me to fly down to Salisbury Plain and land in the danger area in the helicopter and land beyond the gun line. We can fire 105mm live light guns with live ammunition. And he wants me to pin medals on soldiers. Yes, please. Amazing. So, yeah, that's that. But who'd have thought then, and, you know, because I've got no qualifications in being a fitness instructor, who'd have thought a fitness instructor from Birmingham could kind of go from, you know, from where I was to where I am. And then that's why I say I don't know what the next thing will be, because who knows where it could be. But, you know, I'm constantly, well, the honorary colonel thing came completely out of left field, just from working with military charity discreetly for years. And then, you know, hopefully it's probably paid off. So, yeah, there's two things for you.
Big Al, thank you for coming on Road to Success. You were absolutely fantastic today. Please hit that like button and the subscribe button to see more guests that will hopefully inspire you just like Al did. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much.